The faded paint on the familiar gables of my childhood home, inherited by my estranged sister Chloe, masked more than just years of neglect. It concealed a horrifying, decades-old truth that was about to rupture the very bedrock of our family. As Chloe, driven by a desire to sell, unknowingly prepared to unleash the house's deepest, most sinister secret, I found myself drawn back into its orbit, compelled by an inexplicable pull towards the ghosts I never knew haunted its walls. This wasn't just a matter of inheritance or sibling rivalry. It was the unfolding of a 40-year-old murder mystery, a brutal act orchestrated by our seemingly loving parents and meticulously buried within the very structure of our seemingly idyllic past, threatening to consume everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. Now, the quiet quarters of my memory felt chilling, and every familiar floorboard seemed to creak with a story demanding to be told, a reckoning long overdue that would forever redefine what it meant to be a Vance. My life in rural Vermont had always been one of quiet, ordered solitude, a world of neatly cataloged historical facts, and the comforting scent of old books. As a 40-year-old historian, I cherished the hushed reverence of archives, the meticulous piecing together of forgotten narratives, and the profound satisfaction of bringing hidden truths to light. My small, clapboard house, nestled amidst the vibrant fall foliage, was a sanctuary, a stark contrast to the sprawling, sometimes chaotic, energy of the Vance family home back in Connecticut, a place I hadn't willingly set foot in for over a decade. That estrangement, a raw and festering wound that had formed slowly over years of unspoken resentments and clashing personalities, was primarily with my older sister Chloe, 43. She lived a life of glittering surface and transient connections, constantly chasing the next big opportunity, a world away from my quiet academic pursuits. Our shared history, a distant, uncomfortable memory we rarely addressed. A fragile piece of my existence had been shattered in 2022, not by an earthquake, but by the quiet, inexorable passing of my mother, Evelyn. She had been the fragile, unspoken link between Chloe and me, her gentle, if sometimes passive, presence, a constant, if sometimes suffocating, anchor to a family history I often wished to escape, burdened by its unspoken expectations. Her death left a gaping hole, not just in my heart, but in the intricate, unspoken architecture of our family, leaving me to grapple with a grief that felt both personal and strangely public. Then came the will. Evelyn, seemingly in her right mind, had bequeathed the entire family home, valued at a substantial $600,000, solely to Chloe. The news arrived via a curt email from the distant family lawyer, a sterile, impersonal pronouncement that felt like a final, cold betrayal from the grave, a calculated snub that stung more deeply than I cared to admit. I, who had faithfully visited Evelyn every month, driving the long hours from Vermont, meticulously managed her health appointments, patiently listened to her fading memories, and endured her quiet judgments, received nothing but a few sentimental trinkets, a silver pocket watch that had belonged to my grandfather. Chloe, who had rarely called and visited, even less, inherited the entirety of our childhood, the ancestral home that held so many of my own memories. The injustice burned, a bitter metallic taste in my mouth, leaving me with a profound sense of abandonment and a deep, unsettling confusion about my mother's final decision, a lingering question that clawed at the edges of my thoughts. For months, the house sat empty, a silent sentinel to our fractured family, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the familiar New England landscape, reflecting the changing seasons without a flicker of life within. The yard grew wild, overgrown, mirroring the neglected state of our familial bonds. Then, in late 2023, a brusque phone call from Chloe broke the silence, her voice, sharp and impatient, cutting through the quiet hum of my Vermont afternoon like a razor. "Ethan," she began, No preamble, no warmth. I'm selling the house. It's too much upkeep, and frankly, I need the capital. The market's good right now, and I'm ready to move on. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Selling the house, the last tangible piece of our shared history, about to be stripped away, absorbed by strangers, erased from even the memory of a family that once was. Despite the lingering hurt, despite the decade of silence, a primal attachment to that house, to the memories, good and bad, that clung to its old walls, stirred within me, an instinctive need to protect what little remained. Chloe, I heard myself say, the word feeling foreign, heavy on my tongue after so long. A hesitant bridge across a vast divide. Don't you think maybe we should talk about it? It's Mom and Dad's home. Our home. There's nothing to talk about, Ethan, she retorted, her voice hardening, a brittle edge to her tone that warned against further discussion. It's mine. Mom left it to me. Clear as day. Look, I'm flying in next week to start clearing it out. If you want any of those dusty old books you're so fond of, or anything else you deem historical, now's your chance to collect them. Otherwise, don't bother me. I have a buyer waiting. She hung up before I could respond, the dial tone buzzing with the echo of her dismissive finality, a stark punctuation mark to our non-existent relationship. The conversation, if it could even be called that, left me fuming, my hands clenched into fists, a familiar resentment simmering beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. Yet a part of me, the historian, the one who sought continuity and understanding, felt compelled to go, to witness the dismantling of my past, to salvage what little I could from the wreckage of a family I barely recognized. Perhaps, I thought, among the forgotten relics, I could finally understand why my mother had chosen to erase me from her final act of love, why she had seemingly favored one child so completely over the other. The drive from Vermont to Connecticut was long, punctuated by the rhythmic hum of my tires on the asphalt and the even more persistent hum of unresolved emotions in my head, a churning internal monologue. The landscape blurred outside my window, sleepy towns, ancient stone walls, trees ablaze with the dying embers of autumn, each crimson and gold leaf a vibrant yet fleeting memory. Each mile brought me closer to a past I both yearned for and dreaded, a destination that promised both answers and further pain. When I finally pulled my old Subaru into the familiar gravel driveway, crunching over fallen leaves, the house loomed before me, a grand old colonial, its once proud white paint peeling like sunburnt skin, shutters askew, a faded grandeur clinging to its every plank. It looked tired, neglected, much like our family itself, silently bearing the weight of years and unspoken burdens. Chloe's luxury SUV, a sleek, gleaming monument to her carefully curated life, was already parked, gleaming incongruously in the driveway, a symbol of the vast differences between us. Inside, the house was a mausoleum of memories, filled with the ghost scents of Evelyn's rose potpourri, Thomas's pipe tobacco, and the faint, sweet smell of dust, a symphony of decay and remembrance. Chloe, dressed in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, looked crisp and utterly out of place amidst the chaos of boxes, discarded furniture, and the detritus of a lifetime. Her expression was tight with exasperation, as if the sheer volume of our family's past was an inconvenience to her meticulously planned future. "Took you long enough," she muttered, not looking up from a pile of old linens, her voice a familiar irritant. The strained civility between us was a thin veneer over years of unspoken resentment, a fragile truce in the face of a shared, undeniable past, a past we both desperately wanted to escape, but for very different reasons. We worked in a strained silence, each of us tackling different rooms, the air thick with unspoken words and the pervasive odor of decades of accumulation. I gravitated towards my father's old study, a room I had always found both intimidating and comforting, filled with the heavy scent of leather-bound books and pipe tobacco, a place where profound thoughts were supposedly nurtured. Chloe, meanwhile, was ruthlessly clearing out the living room, tossing cherished heirlooms into donation piles with a detached efficiency that grated on my nerves, each discarded item a further affront to the memories I held sacred. Eventually, feeling the strange, almost magnetic pull, I drifted upstairs, towards the attic. The attic, a cavernous, dusty space, choked with forgotten treasures and childhood secrets. It was a realm of hushed whispers and dancing shadows, a place where, as children, Leo and I had spun elaborate fantasies amidst the trunks and forgotten furniture, our youthful imaginations filling the void of the adults' silent disagreements. The air was thick, with dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight, creating ethereal columns in the gloom. The dry, brittle smell of aged paper and mothballs stinging my nostrils, a potent cocktail of the past. I started sifting through old boxes, each one a miniature time capsule, revealing forgotten layers of our family's history. Old school projects, forgotten toys, stacks of yellowed newspapers, relics of a bygone era. Then, behind a stack of ancient tax records, tucked deep into a recess in the far corner where the roof sloped steeply, my fingers brushed against something cold and unyielding. It wasn't just a wall. It felt hollow, subtly different from the solid plaster surrounding it. My historian's instinct, honed by years of seeking hidden narratives, by recognizing the subtle shifts that indicated a concealed truth, hummed to life. I pushed harder, feeling a subtle give, a slight tremor in the plasterboard. With a grunt, I managed to dislodge a section of the plasterboard wall, revealing a narrow, dark opening obscured by decades of dust and spiderwebs. A hidden compartment. My heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, a mix of childish wonder and adult apprehension stirring within me, a premonition of something momentous. The air in the compartment was still, heavy, undisturbed for decades, thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten secrets. Inside, nestled amongst layers of ancient, yellowed linen and a scattering of dried lavender, lay a small, tarnished metal box, its surface dull with oxidation. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid, releasing a puff of dust that danced in the sunlight, revealing its devastating contents. The contents were few, but devastating in their implications. A handful of faded photographs, brittle with age, their edges curled. A small, leather-bound diary, its pages swollen and fragile, a faint floral scent clinging to its covers, and a single thick envelope, sealed with a broken wax emblem, clearly marked, Last Will and Testament, Beatrice Vance, Aunt Beatrice, my father's sister, Evelyn's sister-in-law. She had died years before I was born. A shadowy figure whispered about in hushed tones, her name always followed by a pregnant silence, a subtle shift in conversation. Curiosity, a powerful, irresistible force that had defined my academic career, overwhelmed any lingering sense of propriety. This wasn't just a discovery. It was an invitation into a past I never knew existed, a past my family had meticulously buried. A secret so potent, it had shaped generations, and I had to know why. I sat on a dusty trunk, the brittle pages of the diary crumbling slightly under my fingertips. The sunlight filtering through the grimy attic window, illuminating the delicate script, a precise, feminine hand. The first entries were innocuous, musings on daily life in 1985, the ordinary concerns of a young woman, town gossip, plans for a local fair, a new beau. My father, Thomas, then 35, and Evelyn, 32, were mentioned frequently, always with affection. Beatrice writing of their bustling life as young parents, raising two small children, Chloe and me, in this very house. I found a photo tucked within the pages, Beatrice smiling brightly, her arm around a tall, handsome man, a stranger to me, but his gaze was warm, his hand linked with Beatrice's, an undeniable spark between them. Then, the tone shifted, subtle at first, a growing tension in the words, a hint of desperation seeping into the elegant script, references to Thomas's temper, Evelyn's worrying, family pressure to conform, and then the entry that shattered my world into a million irreparable pieces, dated October 17, 1985. The ink seemed darker on that page, the words seared into my mind, burning themselves into my memory. Beatrice wrote of an argument, a terrible escalating fight between her lover, the man from the photograph, a vibrant artistic soul named Marcus Thorne, and my father, Thomas, right here in this very house. Marcus had apparently threatened to expose something about my father's business, some shady dealings, something that would ruin the Vance name, unraveling the carefully constructed facade of respectability. The fight escalated, shouts echoing through the house, Beatrice describing the frantic sounds from her hiding place upstairs. Beatrice described running downstairs, drawn by a sickening thud, finding Marcus on the floor, bleeding profusely. My father standing over him, a heavy brass fireplace poker clutched in his hand, his eyes wide with a terrifying primal fury, a look I had never seen, not even in my darkest nightmares. He just kept hitting him. Beatrice wrote, her hand clearly trembling as she penned the words, the ink blurring slightly. Over and over, Mama and Papa Vance were there, Evelyn too. They saw it. They just stood there, frozen, their faces pale, mouths agape. Then, silence. Thomas looked at us, his face pale, his eyes screaming a silent threat. He deserved it, he said, his voice a low growl. He threatened us, threatened the family, everything we built. And then, the horror truly began. The cover-up, the whispered conversations late into the night, the grim instructions, the late-night digging in the backyard, under the old oak tree where Chloe and I would later play. My breath hitched, a strangled sound caught in my throat, a visceral reaction to the terror Beatrice had felt. My father, murderer, in this house, and my mother, Evelyn, my sweet, gentle mother, had not only witnessed it, but had been complicit in its concealment, burying a man in the very soil where her children would play. My grandparents, too. The entire family, bound by blood and a monstrous secret, a pact of silence that had endured for decades. Marcus Thorne's disappearance had been reported by his sister days later, a local missing persons case that had gone cold, quickly dismissed as him skipping town by the local authorities, just as Beatrice had foreseen. No one had ever looked in the backyard. My childhood, the peaceful, idyllic memories of Christmas mornings by the fireplace, summer barbecues under the oak tree, my father's steady hand, my mother's gentle lullabies. All of it was a meticulously constructed lie, built on a foundation of blood and deceit. The house, once a symbol of comfort, of belonging, now felt like a tomb, its walls dripping with a past I never knew, a past that screamed of betrayal, a horrifying truth that left me feeling utterly untethered from my own reality. The cryptic will found alongside the diary was another chilling piece of the puzzle, a final, desperate act from Beatrice to posthumously reveal the truth. It was a separate codicil, handwritten by Beatrice herself, dated just days after the murder. It stipulated, in oddly formal legal language for a personal document, that the house could never be sold, for it contained the truth that binds us and the secrets that protect the Vance name. Let its secrets die with the last family member. It wasn't just a will, it was a desperate, if ultimately futile attempt by Beatrice to ensure the truth, however buried, remained tied to the physical structure of the home, a silent, damning testament to her own moral anguish. It was legally problematic, undoubtedly voided by later more official wills from my parents, but its intent was terrifyingly clear. Chloe's inheritance wasn't a gift, it was a trap. A gilded cage designed to keep the secret buried, the house holding its grim truth hostage, an unwitting accomplice in the crime. My parents, even in death, were still orchestrating the cover-up, still manipulating their children, still ensuring the family name remained untarnished, no matter the cost, even if it meant sacrificing their own daughter to the burden of their monstrous secret. I stumbled out of the attic, the diary clutched in my trembling hand, the sunlight from the windows now feeling harsh, accusatory, mocking the darkness I had just unearthed. The air downstairs felt heavy, suffocating, saturated with 40 years of unspoken lies, of a past that clawed at my senses. Chloe, still ruthlessly sorting through old silverware in the dining room, her back to me, looked up, her expression impatient, her hands busy polishing a tarnished spoon. "Find any of your precious history up there, Ethan? Or just more junk for the donation pile?" Her words, usually just annoying, now grated on me like fingernails on a chalkboard, utterly devoid of any understanding of the seismic shift that had just occurred in my world, the utter destruction of my reality. My throat felt tight, constricted, my stomach churning with nausea, threatening to betray the composure I desperately clung to. "Chloe," I managed, my voice hoarse, barely audible. "We need to talk, right now, about this house, about Mom and Dad, about everything." The casualness of her demeanor, the superficiality of her concern, was suddenly intolerable, an affront to the magnitude of the truth I carried. The blood in my veins felt cold, my skin clammy, as if I had just walked through a ghost, a terrifying realization clinging to me like a shroud, refusing to let go. I laid the diary and the cryptic will out on the dining table, the faded pages stark against the polished wood, their ancient script screaming a truth that reverberated through the silent house. Chloe, initially dismissive, scoffed at the old junk. Her eyes narrowed in annoyance. "What is this? Some kind of weird prank, Ethan? I told you, I'm selling the house." But as I forced her to read Beatrice's trembling words, pointing to the dates, the specific details of the argument, the poker, the blood, the late-night digging under the old oak tree, her face went through a terrifying transformation. Disbelief, then anger, then a profound, almost primal fear twisted her features, draining them of all color. "This is insane, Ethan," she shrieked, her voice high-pitched and frantic, pushing the diary away as if it were contaminated, her hands shaking. Aunt Beatrice was eccentric. Everyone knew that. She had a flair for the dramatic. This is just some fantasy, some twisted story she made up. It's not real. It can't be. She grabbed a cryptic will, tearing at the brick-and-wax seal, her fingers fumbling. "And this? It's meaningless. An old piece of paper. Mom left me the house. It's mine. You're just trying to ruin it. Ruin everything. Because you didn't get anything. Because you're jealous." Her denial was a brutal reversal, a fresh wave of betrayal that stung more sharply than any of my mother's slights. The sister I had always secretly yearned for connection with, the one I hoped would share in the shock and horror, was rejecting it outright, choosing to believe the comfortable lie, clinging desperately to her inheritance, to the illusion of normalcy. She refused to acknowledge the obvious, the dates that aligned with Marcus Thorne's disappearance, the specific details that matched known missing person reports, the palpable terror radiating from Beatrice's diary pages. She saw only her inheritance, her vision of a quick sale and a lucrative payout, now threatened by my discovery. Her anger turned venomous, her eyes blazing with a familiar fury that used to send me retreating. "You're always trying to dig up things, Ethan. Always living in the past. Why can't you just let things be? Why can't you just let Mom rest in peace?" She stormed out of the house, the front door slamming shut with a resounding thud that echoed through the empty rooms. leaving me alone in the oppressive silence, surrounded by the ghosts of a murderous past, my heart aching with a profound, terrifying loneliness. The estrangement now a chasm too wide to bridge, perhaps forever. The days that followed were a blur of nausea and disbelief, punctuated by the unsettling quiet of the house, which now felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum. I barely ate, barely slept, haunted by Beatrice's words, by the image of my father, a killer, my gentle mother, an accomplice, their faces twisting in my mind. The house, once a repository of cherished memories, now felt like a suffocating tomb. Each creak of the floorboards, each shadow, a whisper of the unspeakable, a grim secret seeping from the very plaster. My childhood memories, once so bright and comforting, now felt tainted, warped, as if viewed through a prism of blood, sickeningly artificial. The swing set in the backyard where Leo and I had played, laughing, now seemed to hover over a grave, a chilling realization that stole my breath. The guilt was a raw, festering wound. How could I have been so blind? So utterly ignorant of the darkness lurking beneath our family's polished veneer, the respectability they so carefully maintained. My existential crisis deepened. Who were my parents really? And who was I, the product of such a monstrous deception, a living testament to their crime? Chloe, meanwhile, doubled down on her denial. Her calls and emails laced with threats of legal action if I dared to spread malicious rumors that would jeopardize her sale. Her lawyer sent me a terse cease and desist letter, a formal, cold paper barrier designed to silence me, to legally intimidate me into burying the truth. The local police, when I cautiously approached them with the diary and my suspicions, politely dismissed it as hearsay, 38 years old, from a potentially unstable witness, lacking concrete evidence for a missing person case long closed, a case they had, perhaps, been encouraged to close quickly. The bureaucratic hurdles felt insurmountable, the weight of official indifference crushing, making me feel utterly alone against a powerful, entrenched silence. It seemed everyone preferred the comfortable lie to the inconvenient, horrifying truth. But I couldn't unsee what I had seen, couldn't unread what I had read. My father, my mother, my family, they were murderers and conspirators. And Marcus Thorne, an innocent man, deserved justice, even if it was 40 years too late. Even if it meant tearing down the entire edifice of my family's legacy. The historian in me, the one who found solace in unearthing forgotten narratives, in giving voice to the voiceless, now burned with a new, urgent purpose, a fire that consumed my grief and shame, transforming it into relentless drive. This wasn't just a historical puzzle. It was a deeply personal quest for truth and justice, a moral imperative. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. The story was too big, the cover-up too entrenched, spanning generations and involving powerful local figures. I needed help, not just legal or investigative, but public. I needed someone who understood the power of narrative, who could cut through the institutional inertia and pierce the veil of silence that had protected my family's monstrous secret for so long. My mind, racing through possibilities, landed on the burgeoning world of true crime podcasts, a medium that excelled at uncovering forgotten injustices. After days of relentless searching, listening to countless episodes, I found her, Maya Sharma, host of Unsolved Echoes, a wildly popular podcast known for its meticulous research, empathetic storytelling, and a penchant for cold cases. Her voice, calm yet compelling, had guided me through many a historical mystery, making me feel less alone in my own intellectual pursuits. I sent her a carefully worded email, vague enough to pique her interest, specific enough to convey the gravity of my claim. Family secret, murder cover-up, 40 years old, inherited house, cryptic will, local officials potentially involved. To my surprise, She responded within hours, a short, intrigued message. "This sounds fascinating, Mr. Vance. Call me ASAP." The urgency in her tone, a shared sense of purpose, sent a jolt of hope through me. Our first video call was awkward. Me and my cluttered Vermont study, the faint smell of old paper clinging to the air. Maya in a sleek, minimalist podcast studio in LA, her background a blur of high-tech audio equipment. I laid out the story, my voice trembling at first, then gaining strength as I recounted the diary entries, the hidden compartment, the true meaning of the cryptic will, the horrific details of the murder. Maya listened, her expression unreadable, her dark eyes sharp and intelligent, taking in every nuance, every emotional tremor in my voice. When I finished, the silence on her end stretched, punctuated only by the faint hum of her studio equipment, a tangible pause before the storm. "Ethan," she finally said, her voice softer than I expected, laced with a genuine awe and horror. "This is incredible and horrifying. The familial aspect, the deliberate manipulation of the inheritance, the decades-long cover-up. It's a goldmine for storytelling, but also incredibly sensitive and dangerous. We need more than a diary. We need to corroborate every single detail before we even think about touching this. We need irrefutable proof." She seemed genuinely moved, not just by the potential for a compelling story, but by the profound injustice, the human tragedy at its core. "I can connect you with Richard Hayes," she offered. "He's a retired investigative journalist, a legend in cold cases, specifically designed to dig into institutional corruption. He'll know how to get the real evidence, how to rattle the right cages without getting us all killed." Richard Hayes was everything Maya described: sharp-witted, cynical, and utterly relentless. A grizzled veteran of countless battles against corruption and injustice. He met me in a greasy spoon diner, halfway between Vermont and Connecticut. A no-nonsense man with a weathered face, a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, and a gaze that seemed to penetrate straight through facades, directly into the hidden truths. He listened to my story over lukewarm coffee, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to a grudging interest, a glint in his eye that signaled a challenge accepted. He meticulously examined the diary, the old photographs, the cryptic will, his fingers stained with old ink, tracing the fragile pages. Beatrice was no fantasist. "Ethan," he concluded, tapping a finger on a particular diary entry, the page detailing Marcus's final moments. "This reads like a woman terrified, but determined to leave a trail, a desperate cry for justice from beyond the grave." He quickly confirmed Maya's assessment. The story was explosive, potentially career-defining, but proof, hard, undeniable proof, was paramount. "Police reports will be useless, too old, probably buried, doctored, or conveniently lost. We need living witnesses, and we need to find that body. Without it, it's just a tragic, unsubstantiated family legend." The collaboration between the three of us became my new focus, my reason for breathing, a powerful purpose that eclipsed all personal pain. We met regularly, virtually, and sometimes in person. Our collective energy a powerful force against the daunting task ahead. Maya, with her storytelling instincts, helped me craft the narrative, refining the emotional beats, understanding how to present such a complex, sensitive story to a wide audience. Richard, with his decades of journalistic experience, mapped out the investigative strategy, identifying key areas of inquiry. We pored over historical records, old property deeds for the Vance home, town council meeting minutes from 1985, archival newspapers from neighboring towns, searching for any mention of Marcus Thorne's disappearance, anything that could corroborate Beatrice's chilling account beyond her personal testimony. We found a small article in a regional paper from October 1985, a brief, almost perfunctory mention of a local man, Marcus Thorne, missing after a dispute, believed to have left town for California. It was exactly what Beatrice had detailed, confirming the cover-up had successfully painted him as a runaway, a convenient narrative for the town. The biggest challenge was the local community itself. The Vance family had been pillars of the town for generations, respected, influential, their name synonymous with prosperity and old New England values. People wouldn't want to believe one of their own was a murderer, let alone that an entire family and perhaps local officials had been complicit in the cover-up. Richard and I began discreet interviews with older community members, former town officials, anyone who had lived in the area in 1985 and might remember Marcus or the Vances. We navigated a minefield of whispers, evasiveness, and outright fear. People remembered Marcus Thorne, a charismatic outsider, a free spirit who had dated Beatrice. They remembered his sudden disappearance, the polite, almost enforced silence that followed. There were hints of fear, hushed tones, averted gazes when the Vance name came up. "Some things are best left buried, Ethan," one elderly neighbor warned me, her voice trembling, her eyes darting nervously. "Your family, they were powerful, always have been. Don't go digging where you shouldn't." The resistance was palpable, confirming the insidious depth of the cover-up, how it had woven itself into the very fabric of the community, an unspoken pact of silence. It wasn't just my parents who had perpetuated the lie. The entire town had, in its own way, become complicit in the silence, choosing convenience over conscience. The setbacks were numerous, a constant barrage of obstacles designed to wear down my resolve. Chloe's lawyer sent more aggressive letters, threatening slander charges, demanding I cease my delusional investigations. My own paltry savings were quickly dwindling from travel, consultation fees, and the unexpected costs of extensive archival research. There were moments of profound doubt, despair, when the weight of it all threatened to crush me, when the enormity of what I was trying to do felt utterly hopeless. Could I truly bring down the entire legacy of my family, expose them to such ignominy? Could I truly expose my parents as murderers, shattering any remaining illusions I held about them? Was it worth the cost, the inevitable pain, the complete destruction of any last vestiges of a happy childhood, the absolute alienation from my sister? But then I would reread Beatrice's diary, her desperate plea for truth, her courageous act of leaving this evidence behind, and I would think of Marcus Thorne, lying in an unmarked grave, his story erased, his family denied justice. The guilt of knowing and remaining silent became a far heavier burden than the fight itself, propelling me forward when I felt I could no longer stand. Our breakthrough came with a former county clerk, now in his late 80s, living in a quiet nursing home on the outskirts of town, his memory fading, but his conscience, it seemed, still intact, stirring in his final years. Richard, with his gentle persistence and years of experience coaxing information from reluctant sources, had slowly built a rapport with him, visiting him almost daily for weeks, simply listening to his stories. The old man, a tremor in his voice, his eyes distant and haunted by the past, confessed to accepting a substantial payment from my grandfather, Thomas Vance Sr., soon after Marcus Thorne's disappearance. "It was a lot of money, son," he whispered, his gaze distant, enough to ensure that certain records disappeared, certain leads weren't pursued, a missing persons report quickly closed. No real investigation. He described the chilling visit from my grandfather, his quiet, intimidating presence, the heavy envelope of cash, the unspoken threat that accompanied it, the understanding that some things simply went away. The bribes had extended beyond just the clerk. He hinted at local law enforcement, even a coroner, all paid to look the other way, to ensure Marcus Thorne vanished without a trace, his death conveniently classified as him leaving town. A simple case of a man wanting a fresh start. This was it. Corroboration. A living witness to the deepest layers of the cover-up, a crack in the wall of silence. The sheer scale of the family's conspiracy, spanning generations, was dizzying, a web of deceit so vast it seemed impossible to untangle. Yet here we were, pulling at the threads, slowly but surely unraveling it all. The cryptic will, which I had initially dismissed as legally unenforceable due to its unofficial nature, turned out to be another powerful piece of evidence, albeit in a civil context. Eleanor Vance, a formidable civil attorney recommended by Richard, no relation to Arthur, but equally as sharp and strategic, explained its strategic importance over a tense video call. While it won't stop the sale directly, she clarified, her voice precise, her gaze unwavering. It clearly demonstrates your parents' intent to conceal, their deliberate manipulation of their inheritance to ensure a secret stayed buried within the house. It paints a damning picture of their state of mind, their conscious decision to bind the house, and thereby Chloe, to the lie, creating a legal obligation for Chloe to perpetuate their deception. This is fraud, Elena, fraud on an epic scale, and profound emotional distress caused by that deceit. The house itself, once merely an object of sentimental value, now stood as a silent, grim testament, a physical piece of evidence, its secrets begging to be exposed, a silent witness to a horrifying truth. With all the pieces in place, the truth was ready to be unleashed. The plan was meticulous, designed to maximize public impact and legal leverage, a carefully orchestrated symphony of revelation. Maya's podcast would break the story first. Backed by Richard's unimpeachable journalistic integrity and corroborated by our growing mountain of evidence. Then Eleanor would swoop in with the civil lawsuit, forcing official attention, leaving the local authorities no choice but to act. The emotional tension within me was a constant, vibrating hum, a mix of fear, anticipation, and a grim satisfaction. I was terrified of what would happen, of the chaos I was about to unleash, of the complete destruction of my family's name, of the social fallout, but I was more terrified of silence, of letting Marcus Thorne remain forgotten, of letting my parents' monstrous secret die with them, of becoming complicit in their crime by choosing not to act. My conscience, finally awakened, demanded justice, no matter the cost. The release of the Unsolved Echoes expose was meticulously planned, timed to hit national news cycles on a quiet Monday morning, giving it maximum impact. The episode was chillingly titled, The Vance Family's Hidden Grave, a 40-year-old murder in the childhood home. Maya's soothing yet compelling voice introduced the seemingly idyllic Vermont historian, Ethan Vance, who uncovered his family's darkest secret. She wove my narrative with chilling excerpts from Beatrice's diary, her words, read by a professional voice actor, painting a vivid, horrifying picture of the murder and the subsequent cover-up. Each detail a hammer blow to the listener's peace of mind. Richard Hayes's calm, authoritative voice provided the investigative backbone, detailing the bribed official's confession and the systematic way the murder had been buried, linking the family's influence to the official silence. The episode ended with a powerful call to action, for the local police to reopen the cold case, for justice for Marcus Thorne, for the truth to finally see the light of day. The impact was immediate and explosive. The podcast went viral, trending across social media platforms within hours. The story of the Vance family, once symbols of New England respectability, became synonymous with murder and decades of deceit, a brutal reevaluation of their legacy. Local news outlets, initially hesitant, forced to confront the public outcry, were compelled to cover the growing scandal. National news soon followed, drawn by the sensational nature of the story. A beloved prominent family, a hidden murder, a secret preserved for 40 years, within the innocuous walls of a seemingly ordinary home. Documentaries were immediately commissioned, turning the quiet colonial house into the infamous Vance family murder house, a grim landmark, a destination for true crime enthusiasts. Cameras descended on the sleepy town. Reporters swarmed, their microphones shoved into the faces of bewildered, horrified residents, demanding answers, forcing them to confront the darkness that had festered in their midst. The veneer of peace and respectability that had cloaked my childhood was ripped away, replaced by a relentless public scrutiny that left no stone unturned. The pressure on the local police was immense, insurmountable. With the podcast's release and the mounting media attention, the sheer volume of public outcry, they had no choice but to reopen the cold case. The initial dismissal of Beatrice's diary as hearsay now looked like gross negligence, a testament to the old cover-up's lingering power, making the police department itself subject to internal review. Investigators, now under intense public and federal scrutiny, moved with an urgency they should have had decades ago. Their first official act, after securing the property as a crime scene, was the exhumation of Marcus Thorne from beneath the old oak tree in the backyard. Its branches, once a childhood playground, now casting long, dark shadows over a grave. I was not present for this, choosing to keep my distance from the grisly scene, but the news reports described the grim, methodical process. The quiet solemnity of the forensic teams, their faces stoic as they painstakingly uncovered the past. Weeks later, the coroner's report confirmed it. Skeletal remains consistent with a violent death, a fractured skull matching the description of a blunt force trauma, consistent with Beatrice's diary, a heavy, bladed object. It was the irrefutable, physical proof we needed, confirming Beatrice's desperate, tragic truth, solidifying the narrative of murder beyond any doubt. Eleanor, seizing the momentum with perfect timing, filed the civil lawsuit against the Vance estate for fraud, emotional distress, and the wrongful manipulation of inheritance. The civil trial was highly publicized, a secondary wave of media attention washing over the town, keeping the story firmly in the public consciousness. I delivered my emotional testimony, recounting my discovery in the attic, the shattering of my childhood, the profound betrayal by my parents, the guilt of knowing, and the anguish of revelation. My voice, though steady, conveyed the deep, personal violation, the destruction of my entire sense of self. Beatrice's diary was presented as key evidence, its authenticity verified by forensic document experts who confirmed the age of the ink, the paper, the desperate tremble in her script, proving it was written in the moment of terror. The elderly former county clerk, his voice frail but clear, testified about the bribe, the intimidation, the deliberate suppression of the truth. His decades-long burden finally lifted. The house itself became a key piece of evidence, its very structure a silent witness, its hidden compartment a physical manifestation of the family's deceit, its walls echoing with the horrors it had silently contained for so long. The verdict was swift and decisive. The jury, visibly moved by the raw testimony and the overwhelming evidence, returned a verdict that echoed through the courtroom. The Vance estate was found liable for $750,000 in damages to me for fraud and emotional distress. It was a clear, unambiguous condemnation of my parents' actions, a legal acknowledgement of the decades of deceit they had perpetrated, a validation of my long, arduous fight for truth. The house, once valued at $600,000, plummeted to effectively zero. No one wanted to buy the Vance family murder house, a notorious landmark forever etched into the public consciousness, a macabre attraction that drew gawkers but no buyers. It was unsellable, a monument to a terrible crime, a physical manifestation of a family's shattered legacy. My parents, Thomas and Evelyn, though long deceased, faced the ultimate public disgrace. Their meticulously constructed lie, their carefully guarded reputation, was utterly destroyed. Replaced by an enduring infamy, their names now synonymous with murder and cover-up, their legacy forever tainted by blood. The path to closure was not a swift, easy one, but a complex, ongoing journey of rebuilding and redefining. A slow, often painful reevaluation of everything I believed, every truth I held dear. The emotional scars remained, a permanent etching on my soul, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the depths of human deceit. A faint, persistent ache that would never fully disappear. But they were no longer open wounds. They were fading, healing, becoming a testament to my resilience, to the strength I had found within myself, a testament to survival, to a future reclaimed, built on a foundation of hard-won truth. I learned that while some wounds never fully disappear, true healing comes from reclaiming your narrative, from fighting for justice, and from transforming your pain into a source of strength and support for others. The $750,000 in damages, paid from the remaining non-house estate assets and old insurance policies, allowed me to pay off all legal fees, the accumulating costs of the investigation, and provided a new financial foundation for my life, free from the shadow of my parents' manipulation. The house, that silent, grim sentinel, was eventually donated to a local historical society, a collective decision I made with the community's input, ensuring its dark history would be acknowledged. It was transformed, not into a macabre tourist attraction, but into a memorial, a place for truth, a stark reminder of the dangers of secrets, and a testament to the enduring quest for justice. It was a place where Marcus Thorne's story would finally be told, openly and truthfully, his memory finally honored. Chloe and I never reconciled. Her denial hardened into a bitter, unshakable resentment, and our estrangement became a permanent, painful fact. She blamed me for destroying her inheritance, for tarnishing the family name, for unearthing the truth she vehemently refused to accept, unable to see beyond her own loss. The chasm between us, once bridged by the fragile thread of our mother, became an impassable void, a final casualty of the past. But I had found a new purpose. Forged in the crucible of my family's darkest secrets, I became a consultant for families dealing with inherited property disputes and hidden secrets, advocating for legal clarity in wills regarding complex family circumstances, and working with cold case units on similar familial cover-ups. My quiet life as a historian transformed. I now helped others unearth their own difficult truths, guided by my own painful journey, ensuring that their suffering, and Marcus Thorne's, would not be in vain. I learned that while some wounds never fully disappear, true healing comes from reclaiming your narrative, from fighting for justice, and from transforming your pain into a source of strength and support for others. The Vance house would forever whisper its secrets, but now, those whispers were finally heard, ensuring that no truth, however dark, would ever again be buried beneath the quiet silence of a family's carefully constructed lie. And that Marcus Thorne's tragic story would serve as a powerful, enduring echo of justice,